Indelible is a documentary media project in progress. The research is based on the work of Richard Lyle, a former managing editor of a major newspaper in the Seattle area. He met a 23-year-old man named Carl L. Harp in a courtroom in August 1973. Harp passed him a note. It said, "I would like to talk later, after this and the other case are over." He had not even been charged with another crime, but he knew it was coming, and he was innocent of both crimes. But he had been part of a dark pool military, which occurs off the books, and he had been part of this world since he was a kid in poverty in California. He knew how it worked, and he wasn't surprised when he got 95 years for crimes he didn't commit. Lyle was researching Harp's story on his own, not as a reporter. He assigned stories, but he was told to drop the story. He refused, he was demoted, and then he died while 2 FBI agents stood outside his treatment room. He knew something was wrong. The day he fell into a coma, he left his notebooks on a harp hidden across town with a note on where to find them. That was 1975. In 2014, new information surfaced. There were over 1,000 pages of letters Harp had written. They were stored in archives around the world. Multiple Freedom of Information Act requests were made. Through those efforts, it became known Harp had been murdered in prison by authorities, although the media and law enforcement stated it was a suicide by hanging. But the photos received from the coroner showed it was far too bloody a scene to be a suicide, and a medical doctor who knew Harp and worked for the police for many years bragged in 2015 about how Harp, had been tortured and murdered in 1981. The coroner's photos supported this. In a journal, Harp had written about the military-type work he had completed before the age of 18 in Vietnam and Guatemala. Confirming this information opened the door to a very dark world. It's a world of death and guns, using kids, some as young as 14, suffering from poverty in the United States. Their work was overseen and approved by the U.S. government, but not Congress. It seems better to refer to it as dark pool military activity rather than mercenary work, as the contracts are paid by the U.S. government, not a third party. And because it is work that is not approved by Congress, technically it's illegal. Yet it's been going on since the 1960s. This was the period of time Harp and the others in the story were targeted and trained before the age of 16. Harp said there were 32 kids in his group, but there were other groups. So far, all those identified lived in the same area of California in the 1960s. This project is historical, so based on events in the past. But as with most history, there are connections to events today. There was a trajectory in these kids' experiences, a trajectory that is part of most individuals' lives who participate in any form of military activity that is off the books but contracted by the U.S. government. It's a path that leads from serving and receiving rewards for your participation to being removed from history and society in disgrace. The removal of the participants at times involves naming them for a crime they didn't commit, or in some cases, they were possibly told to commit. At other times, it involved becoming the subject of a well-crafted smear campaign with the help of law enforcement and the courts. If none of these tactics work to remove the individual's capacity to function or speak with validity, then more horrific strategies are used, or lives are ended. So these survivors of dark pool military work are often named as shooters in crimes they never committed, or if they did participate in the crimes, they thought they were merely completing another task in a long line of assignments, only to learn later they had become the target. Over the past 5 decades, the mass shootings which have emerged in ever-increasing frequency on U.S. soil show most of the named shooters or subjects have some experience with dark pool military activity as young kids, and most came from poverty. Harp was falsely named as the shooter in one of the first public shootings where a high-powered rifle was used to shoot into oncoming traffic on a busy freeway in the Seattle area. This occurred after his dark pool participation. He was in the tail end of his trajectory, heading down. Multiple eyewitnesses described a different shooter in a different vehicle, but this was never explored. And we see this pattern in almost every mass shooting. There is the named shooter and the unnamed shooters, who multiple witnesses saw, but they are never again identified or discussed.